This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you wherever you get your podcast. Also available on Sirius On Demand and on YouTube for that multimedia experience. Dan Naturman here, Comedy Cellar. Well, let's call it a regular. Not as regular as others, but regular enough. We're here with Noam Dworman.
Hello.
He owns the Comedy Cellar, the ever-expanding Comedy Cellar, soon to be open. A new location on 6th Avenue and West 3rd Street. Periel Aschenbrand joins us as well. And via the miracle of teleconferencing, Riverside teleconferencing software, the future is here. Richard Hanania, president of the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology, also has a popular substack, which you can talk about, Richard, if you want to let people know about the substack.
Sure. It's a substack. I write regular columns, and it's just my name, richardhanania.com, or if you Google me, it's like the first thing that'll come up.
Well, I read the Substack. The Substack is excellent. Richard is one of the most interesting, original thinkers there is in the country.
Wow.
He absolutely is. And he'll write about all different things that you'd never think of, including, you read something about, did you write something at one time about popular music has gotten stale and how movies have changed, whatever comes to his mind. But he always has a take, not just a take for the take of having it, for the sake of having a take, but an interesting, deep take on things. I don't know. Were you a child who pondered stuff? Like when did that talent of yours arise?
If you knew me as a child, you would probably think I was one of the least likely people in the world to be doing what I was doing. I mean, I was my freshman year of high school, I was ranked 390 out of 400. I just didn't go to school. I didn't really have intellectual interest. I was sort of lost. I was always a little bit independent minded. That's the kind of that's the through line. But then, at some point I developed intellectual interests. I tried the academia thing. I realized, as you said, I like writing about broad topics. I like just listening to modern music and reviewing it and writing about the economy the next day. And you really can't do that in academia. So I was always sort of in my own world and sort of independent. But I was a sort of a strange path that I took here.
Could I just say that apropos of Batya Sargon saying you were a compliment vampire, and I was saying, yeah, I didn't even know what she meant, but I think she meant Noam is stingy with compliments. But he just called you Richard, one of the great most original thinkers in America.
Yeah, well, the only thing worse than stingy with compliments is being very generous with compliments, except to a few. I don't know. It's stupid. It's a dumb thing. Anyway, so Richard, being the king of the hot takes. Now you and I have diverged. I'm sure it'll become clear here because I share your disdain of the anti-intellectual right, but I don't think I've turned away from the right as much as you seem to have, which is improbable considering your most recent book was just a tour de force against the left and their racial politics and all that. Anyway, let's start with the election. What are the first takes you have? What are your hot takes on the election?
The election, I mean, it's impressive. I mean, the Trump's is a magical figure. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, what the man has been through, and I'm sort of in awe of it. And I have a lot of critiques of him personally, and I take this is probably why you think I sound more left wing these days, because I agree with pretty much most of the left wing takes on Trump. But the man has but the man has a unique appeal, and he just like the stuff that sinks people. I was looking at the election results last night. Like Mark Robinson, you remember Mark Robinson? He was on Nude Africa Forum or whatever. The black guy from North Carolina. You don't remember the story? The crazy black guy from North Carolina. He was a Republican governor.
Yes. He said what was his pen name?
He was writing for. I don't think he had a pen name. He was writing on a porn forum a forum that was connected to a porn site called Nude Africa.
But he had a name that he went by, didn't he? I remember the story, but go ahead.
Crazy stuff, praising Hitler and talking about tranny porn and this and that. And of course he lost by 15 15%. That's like what happens when you do stuff like that. Trump, I mean, says all kinds of crazy things, and he wins North Carolina, right? In Arizona, this crazy woman, Carrie Lake, who keeps denying every election, she keeps running elections, she keeps losing, she keeps saying they're stolen. She loses pretty decisively. A lot of the Senate candidates for the Republican did well. Trump denies that he lost 2020, is, still spreading crazy conspiracy theories. Recently said he would have won California if not for vote fraud in 2020. And it just doesn't matter. Just nothing matters with this guy. And there's just some appeal. I mean, he, college educated Republicans voted for Nikki Haley. They preferred Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis in the primaries. So like, there's no segment of like the American elite, just broadly defined as people with college educations, who find this man appealing. Right. But he's got this magic. He dominates the Republican Party. He won 2 elections and almost won a third. And it's just, we have to say this is just a unique historical figure.
Do you think any of this is choreographed on his part, his way of speaking, the growl that we said, we love the Puerto Ricans. I mean, was that just something that just came naturally to him, or does he think, oh, this would be funny and I'm going to, I just wonder. I mean, I don't assume but
it's fun to speculate. My feeling about these things is that the people who have true charisma and have connection with their followers the way that Trump has, they are themselves. They're not putting on an act. He's putting on an act. He A/B tests stuff when he goes to a speech. He says this and the crowd gets excited. So he says, I'm going to say it this way, but not that way. But I think basically what he has and what other politicians don't have is he's actually like the voter. Like, he doesn't read. He just watches TV. He just thinks immigrants have taken all the jobs, and it's his way of sort of seeing the world. He loves McDonald's, right? He's got this sort of personality and way of being. He's just richer than everybody, but he's sort of like acts like the way most like regular Americans would act if they were a billionaire. And yeah, I think he can't fake it. I think the other people try to take his issues, but they do not have that connection with the with his voters.
Well, he might be like his voters, but most people don't have that kind of magnetic hold.
Right. He's not like them in every way. Absolutely. Yeah. He's like them in aesthetics and tastes, but like richer and like bolder. And they seem to love that.
Well, do you have an analysis of why he gets away with the things you described, whereas those other people don't?
Yeah, I mean, I have a article called "The Biomechanics of Trumpism," and I talk about how there's been these kind of eras in how people understood Trump. So at the very beginning, there was this idea that like it was just like economic issues, like they were just mad about the jobs going overseas. He came in, he governed pretty much like a standard Republican. Then it became, oh, it's all about immigration and it's about foreigners and this and that, and that there's something true to that. But over time, I think people have come to realize that like, this man just has some kind of quality that's just very naturally a leadership quality. So I was analyzing just his face. Like when he gets caught, for example, in like a bold-faced lie, every other politician or everyone else almost in public life, like gets embarrassed. They turn a little red. They start stuttering. They talk faster. He just says stuff and his expression doesn't change. Like he just goes, he'll like DeSantis. I was comparing him to DeSantis during the primaries, and DeSantis wouldn't go on CNN. He was like, "Oh, fake news media," he wouldn't go on any liberal network. And Trump would go on all of them. And the reason he could go on all of them and it didn't matter, because no matter what they threw at him, they could have him. They could just be completely correct on the facts and catch him in lies. He would just perform the exact same, whether it's the friendliest interview or the most hostile interview in the world. So this is a man who's like he's like you like have unique geniuses that are like once in a century. He's got a unique lack of shame that is just whatever this sort of leadership quality has. He's just a unique figure.
He also has from time to time moments of clarity where you would think, oh, this is a bright guy who knows what he's talking about, right? A lot of the other ones don't have that. There is Trump. We say, oh, he was very reasonable. He was measured. He was. He obviously has some life experience to draw from, and that so sometimes I'll say, oh, maybe he is all right, and then I'm like, no, he'll say something crazy again. Have you had that experience at all?
Yeah, he does. I mean, I think he's getting less and less coherent as time goes on. He was actually pretty good, actually, on the I listened to the Rogan podcast. He was there for 3 hours and never lost and never really confused. I mean, it was actually impressive for a man his age. And you're right.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
No, I think you're right. He's meant, but you can see the decline. You can watch him in speech 2016 versus today. It's
Yeah.
and especially 2012. It's a big decline. But yeah, he. I don't think it's necessarily his intelligence, his IQ. I mean, he's not, dumb. Or maybe he's a little bit senile, but he's never been really dumb. Yeah, he needs some basic intelligence, I think, for it to work.
Yeah. So in the Rogan thing, I can't remember the details now, but he actually had some knowledge about things that Rogan threw to him at a much more granular level than I expected him to have. It's about the environment and so he surprised me.
Yeah.
But as far as his decline, I have sensed that, although I'm not ready to conclude his decline because the man's schedule is insane. He does more than one rally in a day. He speaks for 2 hours. He's 78 years old. And sometimes you just hear him and he really seems tired. But then you see him another day when he's obviously early and he's refreshed, where he seems 100% as he always has been.
Well, they did do an analysis of the length of the rallies, and they actually go like much longer than they did in 2016. But one interpretation of that is that's actually declined. He can't stay on point. He's just sort of sitting there and just sort of like ranting like an old man, going on forever. He was the Rogan thing. He said some stuff on the environmental stuff. I didn't check if it was true. Who knows? But he was going with Rogan on. He was talking about the history of boxing, and he was talking about the history of MMA, and he knew this stuff. I mean, he really he could talk about like who's the greatest fighter, this and that, and that's just like that's a regular American. That's what a regular American is interested. I don't think Nikki Haley or DeSantis could do that.
Names came to his mind that he probably hadn't said in a while. Like these are the classic signs of decline. You wouldn't remember names, stuff like that. I'm already having that a little bit. So, okay. So did you expect him to win? And I really want to get into what's gone wrong with the right. I really want to get into MAGA in waiting with you, because I find Trump to be quite different than this motley crew of literally crazy, conspiratorial, Tucker Carlson, RFK Jr. It's all connected to Alex Jones. And I mean, this whole thing really even JD Vance. It all worries me after Trump passes from the scene. But let's get to Trump. Did you expect him to win?
The prediction markets gave him about a 55-60% chance. I was thinking probabilistically. I thought that was about right. I didn't have confidence either way.
I don't know how you guys felt. I have a whole theory now. I thought in the last week, all the accusations of him being Hitler, these fake stories about him wanting to put Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad, the dumb joke, the offensive joke that Tony Hinchcliffe told at the convention about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage, and just the constant calling him as a fascist and all this stuff. I felt that this was having a Pavlovian effect, and I thought he was going to lose because of it, because it was having an effect on me. And it just, as a human, just constantly hearing this terrible stuff about the guy, even though some of it was clearly not true, I said they're going to take him down. And then also he was giving bad speeches. His last 10 days were just terrible. So here's my new theory. My theory is the following. He was way up in the polls when the polls were showing him about even. 2 weeks ago, he was much further up in the polls than anybody realized. And he certainly did suffer a decline because of all this bad stuff that came out, because it had to affect him in some way. And yet he still toughed it out because he was still enough ahead to weather that hit that I'm sure he took. What do you think about that theory?
I don't know. I mean, it's been 8 years of the Trump show. We've had 3 elections. I don't know if like one more week of calling him a fascist was probably going to move people all that much. I mean, I think it was just probably, it's inflation. I mean, voters apparently hate inflation. Incumbents are doing poorly across the world. And 2016 was basically, 50-50, at least in the swing states that mattered. 2020 was the same. And just like the anti-incumbent spirit and like the idea that Trump was a little bit better, gave him an extra 3-4 points. Like, I wonder if like anything actually mattered in the end, because this has been the same thing for 8 years.
But could it be the opposite? Could it be the opposite, that people who heard people like Morning Joe saying these, patently untrue descriptions of Trump, things that Trump had said, could they have been so enraged by this kind of state media lying that it motivated them to go to the polls?
That's what I think.
I mean, maybe, but that's been going on for a while. I mean, look, you say like 10 things that Trump said are crazy, and 1 or 2 of the 10 might not be true. Like the Liz Cheney thing was taken out of context. I think he was saying, she should go to war rather than, I want to shoot her. But he does say, like, people should be executed. He does say there are tweets or Truth Social posts where he says, people need to be arrested. He did say, we have to look at the Constitution. I mean, so there are like, for 1 or 2 that the media is sort of exaggerating or making up. There's like 7 or 8 that are actually real. So look, some people care and some people don't.
I think none of them are actually real in the sense that if I would listen to them and think that he meant what they're reporting that he said. Like Dictator for a day, Dictator on day 1 we can play that later. It's such an absurd interpretation of a lighthearted, almost teasing that he did where he says, all right, yeah, on day 1, I'm going to close the border and I'm going to drill for oil. Yeah. And after that, I'm not a dictator, but that's what I'm going to do on day 1. Yeah, Dictator on day 1. He says he's going to be a dictator. Anyway, Dan wants to get.
Well, he did say that he was standing behind like plexiglass. And he said, well, if they want to shoot me, they got to shoot. He had all these reporters in the front row or whatever. He said he's got to shoot through the reporters. I wouldn't mind. Now that doesn't mean that he's intending to kill reporters, but that's sort of dangerous when a lot of people really hate the media, and the media's done some of the media's done a lot of bad shit in terms of their reporting, but that's kind of a dangerous thing to say, I think.
I agree with the Dictator on day 1 thing. Even that one, you could say that as a joke. There are Truth Social posts. There was one recently within the last few weeks where he goes, we're going to be looking at investigating anyone who wants. It's very sort of explicit. And he does say like stuff like, Mark Milley's talking about me. That's treason. And you know what the penalty for treason is. I mean, he says stuff like this like a lot.
I haven't seen that. I'm going to look that one up.
Just look up. Look up Trump, execute, arrest enemies. There's going to be a few that are like sort of fake newsy, but there's going to be a lot that are just like him actually saying stuff that is what it looks like.
Now, you're of the opinion that the right is essentially a low IQ group, and the left is high IQ, correct? Am I misstating it?
Yeah. Yes. Look, it's not simply if you like give an IQ test to every liberal and every conservative, like liberals would have a few points. I mean, it wouldn't be that massive. Liberals have an intelligentsia. So like liberal media versus conservative media, like maybe the smart conservative people, they go into business, they go into oil extraction or whatever. But when you compare conservative media and influencers to liberal media influencers, I mean, it's night and day. And there's not only like an IQ difference, there's just a basic, like, are you not crazy? And do you care about getting your facts straight? Gap between them.
Now you include Fox News in that?
Fox News is, not as bad as, of course, a lot of the, influencers online. I mean, they did end up paying for the Dominion thing. They did end up pushing, and we have the text from Tucker Carlson saying basically the day after the election, he knew that Trump's allegations were fake, but then they knew they had to like play along because of what their audience wanted, and then they were sort of bleeding viewers to Newsmax because Newsmax, I think it's the audience is actually the main problem here. So yeah, Fox News, I mean, it's a serious journalistic outlet. I don't think they make things up. If I see something on there, I believe they get their facts straight. But there's few of those institutions out there.
Now, right-wing people will bring up the fact, well, what about these stories, including the ones what we just mentioned, like about Liz Cheney, where they actually have a headline: Trump threatens Liz Cheney with a firing squad. And also the stories like the whole Russia fiasco that at some point was clearly not true, or the fact that they denied that the Hunter Biden laptop was real when we already knew that it was real. Like, how do you put those in context? Like they're not conspiratorial, they're not batshit crazy, but extremely dishonest. No.
Look, it's a matter of degrees. Any media that has a political outlook, the people there have politics, they're going to be biased. And, I did see them correct pretty quickly. I did see in some stories afterwards correcting the Liz Cheney thing. It's not made up out of whole cloth, right? You look at that thing out of context. Okay, it's a quote taken out of context. This is normal stuff that happens in politics, right? They got it wrong.
I can't even. I think it's made up out of whole cloth in the sense that there was no way we're talking about, again, the high IQ people who have risen to the top of the profession in the world in the media. There's no way any of them.
Okay, can I tell you what made up out of whole cloth looks like? Harmeet Dillon, who is an RNC official, put up a tweet with retweeted a picture of Jamie Raskin, who's a congressman, Democratic congressman, with a quote: "If Trump wins, we are going to stand there and we're not going to let him take power. He may think he's going to win, blah, blah, blah." The quote was literally just made up, not taken out of context, literally just made up, right? And there's an article I wrote. What?
But part of me says that when the like that's some nutcase right wing person. If somebody sent me an article by that guy, I know I wouldn't even read it. I'm like, don't send me some nutso thing, right? But when major respectable journalists describe what he said about Liz Cheney in a way that no person with their credentials could have done, except when they know that they're lying. Nobody could have heard what Trump said and thought it was anything about a firing squad, let alone the fact that she was going to have a gun too. Everybody knows the point was he was saying, listen, she wants to send people to war. Let's see how she'd like it if she had to go to war. 100% of the people who described it differently knew that's what he meant, and they lied. And, that's how I see it anyway.
They make mistakes. They make mistakes. They get things wrong. I agree with you. It's a different kind of thing where your entire sort of media ecosystem just goes with fake news. So I did write an article called "Left-Wing Ideologies Are Not Conspiracy Theories" or something like that. So I bring up you remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked by a hammer?
Yeah, and I remember when Tucker Carlson laughed about him, and Don Jr. tweeted out bad jokes about it too.
Okay.
Awful.
And like the New York Times has a graphic of all these congressmen, like Ted Cruz and like Donald Trump, like the top people in Republican, not like a crazy person. You can always find a crazy person somewhere saying something, but Tucker Carlson, all these people implying or saying that he was having a gay affair and was attacked during it, right? And I say, let's use this thought experiment. Let's say Ivanka Trump, God forbid, gets into a car accident and somebody says she was out buying crack and driving to get an abortion. Right. Just that it would be on that level, or just completely made up, had no fact, just because Ivanka Trump happened to be an accident. Do you imagine Rachel Maddow, the New York Times, Chuck Schumer would be repeating? Like, I don't think so. That does not happen.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
They have different ways that they go about their dishonesty. The left knows how to do it in a more respectable way somehow, and they are less crazy. There's no question. And I would even say they're more decent as people. They are, because I was just astounded that Tucker Carlson and Don Jr. could make fun of the fact that this old man had to have surgery on his skull, hit over the head with a hammer, and that they would even make any joke. It was just horrifying to me. This is what so I agree with you.
Yeah. I think you're not being
I honestly don't know how to put it all in context, because both sides to me are very repulsive in their particular ways.
Yeah. I don't think you're necessarily being charitable enough about the Liz Cheney thing. Like you say, nobody could ever think that. Look, there's motivated reasoning, right? There's just carelessness. I don't think many people were sitting there and saying a lie. They could have, it's possible you see a 10-second clip or a 20-second clip. You don't see the minute before it. But yeah, like a media, like the standard can't be, does the media ever make mistakes? It does. But that doesn't mean like nothing matters and everyone is always the same. The ABC whistleblower story. I don't know if you follow this, but there was a guy who said there was an ABC whistleblower who was coming out and was basically saying,
follow this, and Bill Ackman retweeted it. Go ahead.
And look, this was an anonymous account called Black Insurrectionist. That the document had misspellings. It was nonsense. It was just complete nonsense. Megyn Kelly doesn't report it as true, but says we're looking into it. This is very serious, right? Megyn Kelly does this. Ted Cruz retweets it, says huge if true. Marjorie Taylor Greene is at a different level. She retweets it and basically assumes that it's true, right? But this didn't even raise to the level of like asking questions, because it was literally based on nothing. And this just doesn't happen on the other side. And it's like, we need a world where like the complete and utter BS, the stuff that's just like like, it shouldn't be, I'm able to go into an anonymous account, make up anything, put up a Word document of 2 pages, and like a senator is retweeting that. The left wing, mistakes, the left wing hoaxes, they are not at that level. And if you're at that level, if your mind, if your epistemological reality, how you gain and process information, is that broken? Like, I don't know, like, where we go from there. Like, I think the Twitter under Musk, I mean, it's better in some ways. I had some trouble with censorship issues before, but yeah, I don't want this to be reality where it's all just nonsense all the time and there's like no check on it.
You said, you used the word mistake. You said the press makes mistakes. Was it a mistake when there's a clip, for example, of Anderson Cooper saying Trump said that there were very fine people on both sides of a white supremacist rally, and then they splice a clip of Trump saying, "I'm not talking about the white supremacists and the white nationalists. I condemn them totally." Is that a mistake, or is that every bit as dishonest as some of the stuff you're talking about on the right?
The very fine people thing, it's interesting because if you know the history of this rally, it was organized by neo-Nazis and white nationalists, right? So he says there are fine people on both sides. And he says, I'm not talking about the white supremacists. Okay, but like that was the rally. So I don't consider that to be like that ridiculous. Like, okay, include that, he didn't say white supremacists are good people. He explicitly didn't say that. But he said something pretty close to saying that a lot of the white supremacists were good people. So I don't consider that at the same level.
See, I don't agree with you because my standard, first of all, I kind of alluded to this already. I hold people who write for the New York Times or CNN or any of these major networks up to a high scholarly standard of kind of an oath to the truth. And my easy standard is like, if I heard their report and then I saw the actual clip, would I then turn to them and say, what the hell? You didn't tell me that. Like that's all. And that's a very easy sentence. So like if Trump, now we don't know, I don't remember what Trump knew, what he didn't know, if he knew who organized the rally, whatever, but he knew that they were there to protest the taking down of Robert E. Lee statues. And he says, listen, if you're going to take down Robert E. Lee, you're going to take down Jefferson, you're going to take down Washington. There were people on both sides, both protesting about the statues. And he says, wait, but I don't mean the white supremacists and I don't mean the Nazis. I just denounced them unequivocally or something like that. You can't cut out the fact that he says, I don't mean them, and I denounce them unequivocally, and then put a headline on it. Trump says there's fine people on both sides. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not an honest mistake. It's a sneaky, clever way of doing what the dumb right-wing Neanderthals don't have the skill and the intelligence to pull off. They can't be that clever. But yeah. I don't know why you give them a pass. I'm convinced they know what they're doing. If they don't know what they're doing, then they're in the wrong profession. They should be fired.
I mean, I got a little bit of a psychology background in academia, and I know a bit about sort of motivated reasoning, and I think that it's a lot easier to fool yourself about things than you might suspect. But look, this is all good natured, good faith media criticism that belongs. Right. The New York Times does that. The CNN does that. That's great. We should talk about that. It's a different world, is all I'm saying, from some place where you just make stuff up, put it on the internet, and it's not taking out of context. It's not like not giving it's just made up, just out of freaking thin air, and like that is just like a different level of nihilism. It's a matter of degrees. We're not going to have.
I agree. Like if somebody sends me something from Breitbart, unless it's an interview. Where it's an interview, the source doesn't really matter because it's a transcript. I won't even read it because I just assume they're leading me by the nose somewhere. Yeah. I don't feel that way about the New York Times, which is why I'm so outraged when from time to time I do discover they're leading me by the nose.
And look, I'm not a guy who like just loves the media and worships them. Like I was like, most conservatives 3 or 4 years ago, I would really, really stress about stuff like this very fine people thing and say, this is really bad. What kind of media? These are the worst people in the world. But what happened was like, I saw with the alternative, I'm like, oh wait, they care about truth a little bit. Like they're just not making stuff up. What I saw sort of, conservatives have only had free speech on the internet for 2 years, since October 2022, when Elon Musk bought Twitter. And like, it's bad. I mean, I'm just looking at it and I'm just like, were liberals. I mean, were liberals right? I mean, they weren't perfect. They had a lot of flaws. They ABC, CBS, New York Times, yes. But the stuff that just becomes truth in sort of the right wing sort of echo chamber. I don't know where this goes. It's just a sort of very, very dark.
'Tis the season to make life easier on yourself with HelloFresh. HelloFresh's pre-portioned ingredients and delicious recipes sent right to your door are going to be a total lifesaver. All of their meals are chef crafted, so you're going to be eating well and saving tons of time. HelloFresh lets you customize recipes too, so each meal is just the way you like it. My favorite HelloFresh meal is definitely their salmon. I eat it at least twice a week, and it is so delicious. I love it. You can also check out the HelloFresh Market for over 100 add-on items like desserts, quick breakfasts, snacks, and a lot more. My son loves their snacks too. Want to be the star of the family party this year? Check out their Thanksgiving foods menu options this month that'll help you whip up a feast with minimal effort. Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free seller. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/free seller. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
Well, I'm getting an award next week from the National Coalition Against Censorship because I've been such a staunch advocate of free speech. And I have to confess that I've been having a lot of thoughts along the same lines as you. And I was trying to maybe write something as my acceptance speech to say, look, guys, I'm with you on this free speech stuff, but we have to admit the marketplace of ideas is not quite working as we all imagined it would. You get millions and millions of readers on some totally made up story, and then 20,000 find out that it's not true. Unless we in the free speech community are ready to address this problem in an honest way, the people who don't respect free speech will do it for us. And they will start regulating it in a heavy-handed way, and they'll be right about the problem that they're handling. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe it's just time. Over time, the culture learns the ins and outs, and these things become less potent. But it's worrisome to me. I don't know how you feel about all that.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think every community that cares about a cause has to say, so look, if you care about the Second Amendment, you care about gun rights, and you have stupid people who are irresponsible who just go out firing guns in the air, those That's people right. are not on your side, right? They're saying, oh, I'm the pro, Second Amendment group. No, those people are discrediting you. They are creating the justification for the censorship. I think that a lot of the free speech people, they look at people like Alex Jones and they go, it's a little bit crazy, but free speech. And if they ban him, they're going to come for me next. And it's completely fine to say, Alex Jones really sucks. Alex Jones is not a good figure. I believe in his right to speak, but he's not a good figure. And I think that there needs to be more of that. So I think that's that's a great message. That's exactly what's needed right now.
Do you have any community notes is pretty good. Well, it's underutilized, but when somebody's community noted on Twitter, I think that's very effective. But I don't know, any other safeguards you could imagine?
Yeah. Well, it's hard because the community notes, there's this guy, there's these accounts with 2-3 million followers, and they'll put out 10 nonsense tweets a day, and 1 or 2 will be community noted, and the community notes, people won't see it even as much as the original tweet. So it's not, it's not sufficient. I don't know. I think there might be a way. So I think something and it's crazy, even the censorship, the Twitter stuff, even the stuff that's not fake news, I'll get just DMs in Twitter, and I keep the DMs open. Maybe I'm a masochist, but occasionally I meet interesting people, so it's worth it. But I'll get a lot of messages that I'll be F you, F, the F word for a homosexual, which I'm not a homosexual, by the way, nothing wrong with that, but they will call me that. But they will call me that, and I'll
you
just
are a Zionist.
and I'll report it to Twitter now, and they'll be it didn't violate our rules. I'm like, what value in there is just letting someone just sit there and say F you, F A, so on. There's just no value. That this speech is nothing. So like if a private corporation wants to censor that, like great. And then like you want to do that, but like everyone who would censor that is like the person who would censor you for, misgendering someone. And then it's like we just, like why couldn't Elon Musk have been the guy who said, I'm going to ban the racial slurs and just like the explicitly fake news? Like you should just get strikes for, if you're just spreading fake news like that, you don't have to like judge people's opinions, like whether it's hate speech. If it's just completely made up stuff, that would be sort of the balance. But unfortunately, everything is just like YouTube, like way too far in one direction, or just sort of this free for all on Twitter. And we've seen the results.
Don't you think the truth is available for anybody that really wants to find it? And I think a lot of it, people don't want the truth. And I don't know that these community notes are people are saying, well, maybe the Democrats aren't operating a pedophile ring under a pizzeria or whatever, because the community note told me that. I don't know that that does any good. I think people want to believe these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's right. But you can create like there. It's a matter of degrees. I think that there's people who just are into like the National Enquirer or whatever, and they want to read about like alien abductions and stuff. And I think it's like if there's an appetite for like that kind of stuff, and like QAnon is sort of like this, and National Enquirer was really promoting Trump, has always been promoting Trump, and I think it's sort of like the same audience. Like maybe those people should be like, there should be ways to sort of channel those people and their energies away from politics. I think Trump is like they're like a moths to a flame with Trump. He really draws like a kind of conspiratorial, sort of disturbed, celebrity obsessed kind of individual. So yeah, the appetite is out there. It's just like, how much is it going to be like determining our politics?
Now, how do you explain? I think you're aware that I was very early saying that Tucker Carlson had mental illness, and I didn't understand why nobody was acknowledging it when he was saying that the United States government had UFOs that were divinely inspired by Satan that were killing people, and the government was covering it up. And it was just like total, things that if my wife started saying that, I would immediately take her to a doctor, right? Like, but it seems now lately he said that he was attacked in his sleep by demons, and he has marks to show for it, and something else. And now I think people are coming around to the fact that he's crazy, but yet he sits a seat away from the president. And then he says that Alex Jones is a divine prophet. Alex Jones, who says that the Jews killed JFK and all sorts of Zionist conspiracies, including implicating 9/11. And then J.D. Vance says Alex Jones is right about a lot of things, and then none of them will give the strong arm to a Candace Owens, who says that Kamala Harris is not even black, but she's a Jew. And and so there's this kind of a daisy chain of crazy all around MAGA. And shouldn't we be scared about that?
Yes.
Yes, obviously. You mentioned earlier, like you hold New York Times and CNN to higher standard, which is great. But I think this is sort of it could be a dated view, because you see like the New York Times and CNN up here, and like everyone else who's like a right-wing crazy has no power. But you look at the top, podcasts in the country, they're basically Joe Rogan, not Alex Jones, I don't think, but Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, and Tucker Carlson, and one or two more. Yeah, Haktu, the relatively wholesome, innocent one. Yeah, that's and so yeah, these people have power, and like when they're when Trump is at the top of your ticket, I mean, he's like the conspiracist in chief. So yeah, it's this stuff is like worth taking seriously, and just there's this norm, like when J.D. Vance says, Alex Jones is more right than Maddow. They're thinking in like a very, very tribal way. They want to know, are you conservative? Are you liberal? And they'll defend you if you're conservative. And this is just, we've got to get beyond that. That's a very kind of sort of primitive way to go through life.
Can I go Jew on you for a second? It worries me from a Jewish point of view because, and then I want to get more back to the election. I regard Trump as a very reliable friend of the Jews. He's a baby boomer from Queens. He's typical of his demographic. He spent his whole life with all his closest relationships with Jews. And to the extent he has prejudices, even his prejudices fall in the direction that's helpful to the Jews, meaning we suspect that he has prejudices against Muslims. And so whatever he feels about Israel, he's not likely to take up the Hamas flag. But those people, the other people that we've described, for instance, Tucker Carlson is now enamored with David Irving arguments, David Irving being the most famous Holocaust denier. And as I described, Alex Jones has all these anti-Jewish and anti-Israel conspiracy theories. I don't trust on paper, I don't mean to cast aspersions on J.D. Vance, but, on paper, coming from the, Appalachia and, not having much experience with Jews and being friendly to people who are so anti-Jewish, I don't think he has any kind of deep affection or worry about Israel or Jewish issues in a way that I could rely on if Trump was out of the way. And so although I've never really worried about right-wing anti-Semitism, I do have this foreboding that if Trump were to pass from the scene, MAGA could easily turn into a right-wing anti-Semitic movement.
It's not crazy. I mean, because when you look at sort of right wingers and like sort of when you get into this sort of mystical thinking, this sort of tribalism, this sort of kind of conspiratorial right wing thinking, anti-Semitism is sort of just a natural consequence of that. I mean, the other night someone was telling me that Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate were live streaming together, and you have this one kid, this guy who's like this, Hispanic white nationalist, Catholic, and you have this other guy who's a convert to Islam, but like posts videos of himself with hot women and smoking and drinking and so on. And what do they share? They share anti-Semitism, right? So you have these like this kind of sort of right wing Western kind of alliance with the Muslim world, and Jews are, intelligent, cosmopolitan. They're just different. They're just a different ethnic group. And like that is naturally targeted by people who think in mystical terms and think in terms of blood and think in terms of, foreigners and out groups are out to get us. And so, there's no I think immediate concern for that. Like the next Congress is going to be, very supportive of Israel. All the Republicans basically in national politics are for the foreseeable future. But it's a generational thing that is worth being concerned about.
I mean, Tucker Carlson, as I said, he's already into David Irving theories. He's already claimed, why are we giving money to a country, Israel, that's waging war on Christians? There's a lot of stuff coming from him. And it's perfectly reasonable to think that if Trump were to drop dead tomorrow, Tucker Carlson become the heir apparent to MAGA. And it could happen just that fast. And then, I've said before, I regard Joe Rogan as separate from all these people. I don't think Joe Rogan has any kind of anti-Semitism, but he's very kind to these people. That he gives them, they're on his show. He doesn't judge them. Alex Jones is his pal. So as I've said on the show before, it's kind of, as opposed to guilt by association, it gives them a kind of innocence by association. And I don't know. We Jews are paranoid about these things. So anyway.
With good reason, I might add.
Well, no, yeah, I guess. What do you? So I am very worried about Trump as a president because he's erratic, and we got a glimpse of how he handles a crisis during COVID, and it definitely wasn't the way Mayor Bloomberg would have handled it, or even Ron DeSantis, right? It was not measured and careful and deliberative. And it maybe didn't even matter that much in COVID because COVID just went through the whole world. But if that was a national security crisis, if that was a world war of some kind, I shudder to think that Trump would be our president. So but you want to comment on that? That's just a setup. But if you want to say something about that.
I was going to go on a sort of discussion about Trump and liberals and COVID, but if you were getting, it would be a longer discussion. So go ahead if you
can circle back to that. But I am thrilled. And I think it was almost essential that a major event happened, electoral loss, that hopefully is going to force a reckoning on the left of their horrible ideology, which has cast a dark cloud over so many of us, ruined so many lives, affected my children. I mean, we could go on and on, affected you, I'm sure. that hopefully, finally, they're going to have to redirect from this stuff. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, and the most positive thing about this is if it was just white people, if it was white people went 80% Trump and like minority and Trump happened to win, I think they would just take the lesson that, we're in a white supremacist country and that's all that happened. But actually, I think the data is still coming out. But I think Harris, maybe did a little bit better with college educated whites, and maybe whites moved a little bit to Trump because everyone basically moved to Trump. But the biggest shift among counties is like the best predictor of your county shifting towards Trump is a large Hispanic population. And so I mean, it's amazing. I mean, from 2020, Trump lost, according to the NBC exit poll, by 33 percentage points. This time it was 8, right? A 25-point shift in the demographic in 4 years. Harris won 53, Trump 45. And that's remarkable. I mean, that's telling you like, this is all this wokeness, all of this PC, all of this, you can't say this, you can't say that. It was supposed to make these groups like you and feel comfortable. And they don't. They like you much less than they might like you leftists, much less than they did 10 years ago. And I think if it's just white people, they get defensive and they say, whatever, we're right and we're just morally righteous. When Hispanics, and I see to a lesser extent blacks, I don't know if there's been any black shift, but Hispanics are bigger than blacks at this point as far as minority populations go. I don't think that can help but lead to some reflection. So I'm optimistic on the way it turned out.
I went through a whole rant about the left last week. I'm not going to revisit it, but one story I didn't mention, you guys have heard it, but I know Dan hates to hear the same story more than once. But when my wife's Puerto Rican, she's a person of color, as they say. And anyway, but my daughter was in 2nd grade, and she came home, and she's grown up in a home with, as my wife's a different color, and we have lots of friends who are of all the colors. She never really had any concept of race as far as we could tell. So in the 2nd grade, she comes home and says, "Daddy, you're white. Are you white?" I'm like, "Yes, sweetheart." She says, "Do you treat people badly?" I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, we learned in school that white people treat people badly." And I said, "Sweetheart, have you ever seen Daddy treat anybody badly?" She says, well, maybe you used to treat people badly. So of course, I was furious about this because just the imposition of this subject matter on a girl who believes in Santa Claus, I thought was just, it was more about what the teachers wanted to be doing than anything that was good for the students. But so I said, I'm going to go to that school, a school board meeting, and I'm going to complain about what they're teaching my kid, right? So I thought about that like a quarter of a second. I'm like, of course I'm not going to go do that, because somebody's going to take out their camera, they're going to record me saying whatever I'm saying, and they're going to tweet it out, and I'm going to, be ruined as a racist or whatever it is. And this is just this, as I said, this dark cloud of really control that this ideology was having on my day-to-day life. And that's just one example. I'm just not going to say all the other examples again, but I'll just say people I know who have been ruined. And something had to put a stake through the heart of this. We can't live this way.
As opposed to saying it now to like potentially hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, no, I could say it now, yeah. But I said it at the time on the podcast. It's different. And by the way, it got worse because then it's funny you say that, because I said it. I told the story on the podcast, and I said, and actually, because I want to teach my kids about race, but I want to do it in not a heavy-handed way. I sat my second grader and my kindergartner, who was very precocious, and I read them To Kill a Mockingbird. And they were totally captivated by this book, and they got it. I didn't have to say anything bad about, anybody. They understood the injustice of the story immediately. So then this guy, Seth Simons, who I've become kind of friends with, he wrote a whole column about me being a racist for reading my kids To Kill a Mockingbird. And of course, nothing happened to me immediately or particularly, but it's a tremendously stressful way to live. Now, let me add one more thing. I'm my own boss. So there was only so much risk I was taking because I can't get fired. And it was a long chain to think the customers would start calling. But if I was working at a company, they easily could have taken that column, brought it to HR, and we've seen people get fired for stuff like that. So we all know people who are just petrified of getting caught saying the wrong thing because they can actually get fired from their job. So there's all this self-censorship. There's nobody's fingerprints on it. There's no one leader who's responsible for it. In that case, we would call that leader a fascist. So all of which is to say, I did take this joy in seeing Trump win, not for a second because I like Donald Trump, but because I'm happy to see them lose. And that's where I thought you used to agree with me, and I sense you don't feel that way anymore.
I think it's just because I see the right wingers and crazies because those are my audience, and maybe those are the people. Even though I voted for Trump in the end, but emotionally, I'm sort of. I'm sort of repulsed by these people too, and so yeah, I get it. It's hard to sort of keep both these things. I guess when I was in academia, I think I felt more like you because those were the people that were all around me. I became sort of well known and had like a right wing audience, and maybe I'm just a guy who just hates whatever's in front of me, and that's all that's going on.
Well, how did you vote for Trump in the end after everything you've just said on the podcast?
I'm conservative. I believe in low taxes and low regulation and supporting Israel and legalizing betting markets and all these being anti these labor thugs that wanted to shut down the ports. So it's just like I'm a conventional. I wrote a book against wokeness, free speech. I mean, I'm a conventional conservative in most ways. It just happens that somehow it's the conservatism that I like sort of seems vestigial. I mean, it seems like just by accident, like the good stuff is still there, while the right seems to be going increasingly crazy. But look, I'm a policy guy. I'm going to be paying attention to the court cases that come down and what happens in the federal agencies. And I expect under a Republican administration to be more pleased than I would under a Democratic administration.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think I'm a lifelong liberal Democrat, and I have...
Funny because her speech pattern doesn't correlate.
Why? What's my speech pattern?
No conservative talks like you. Go ahead.
And I think that the Democrats have shit the bed so badly, and especially since October 7th, but even before that, for a lot of this cancel culture and these like horrible far left wing like anti-Semite fanatics. And now we all have to eat, this plate of Donald Trump. Like all of us have to suffer because of it. And I think that I was watching this map last night and I was texting Noam and I'm like, it's unbelievable. Like the entire country voted for Donald Trump. And do you see like any, I don't know, I'm sort of interested in any of your takes on that it was just like they voted against, I think that the country didn't like that there was no primary. And I think that this was really a reaction against that as well.
I didn't hear anybody predicting that Trump, that we would know so early who won.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Harry
did.
Yeah,
Harry did.
Yeah.
What did he say? He said Trump, or he said whoever it is will know.
Harry felt whoever it was, we'd know. He suspected we'd know early.
Okay.
Everything's a matter of odds. Nobody's going to.
Everybody else said, well, I think Trump will maybe eke it out, but we won't know for another week. I don't.
But this wasn't that, right? And this is the other thing that I was saying before we started the show. Like this is Vince McMahon. This is WrestleMania. I'm not maybe in the end surprised at all that like this is who America wrapped its arms around. It's like I think this is more about America than it does about Donald Trump, right? That's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we think that like, oh, the things that annoy me about the left are probably what most people are annoyed by. I do think it's just inflation. I mean, I do think it's just basically like, I think it's just the price of eggs, honestly. I mean, I think we have these sort of tribes and they're there and like, it doesn't explain why Trump did 4 points better in 2024 than he did in 2020. Incumbents, there's some people, there was a op-ed by Iglesias in the New York Times. Basically, incumbents are getting wiped out everywhere in the world because the inflation thing is a worldwide phenomenon. And so like left-wing governments, right-wing governments in, New Zealand and Denmark and the UK and Canada, they've been getting wiped out the last few years. I think it's just sort of, there are bigger forces at work here. You're right. There are some people who just dislike liberalism and the what sort of it's become. But I think that like it is easy to like read our concerns into the election results.
I think if the Democrats had nominated like Nancy Pelosi wanted Josh Shapiro, and he had gone on TV and said, you know what, Larry Summers and Jason Furman warned us this would cause some inflation, and it turns out They may have been right. We erred on the side of caution because we were worried about people not having money, and now the best estimates are that 1 or 2% of that inflation was a result of our policy. But as you can see, we've wrung the inflation out of the economy now. We learned our lesson, and you're definitely better off with us for 20 other reasons.
Yeah.
I think that I mean, and of course, Josh Shapiro would be smart in 1,000 different other conversations where she was obviously afraid. I'm just waiting for the Eliza Doolittle, My Fair Lady stories that are going to come out of what kind of intensive tutoring was going on to Kamala Harris during those first 5 weeks where she didn't do a single interview, where they were literally starting from scratch about where the states are and where the countries are. That's how little respect I have for her intellect. But do you agree with one other thing, which is always, and I think it's getting worse? I went to a Trump rally a couple of weeks ago, and I really did sense this. I'd always felt it, but I really sensed it. They know that liberals look down on them. They know it. Joe Scarborough finally today made reference to the fact of how elites look down on the rubes. And we've seen 3 administrations make the same kind of faux pas. Obama talked about they cling to their religion and their guns. And Hillary Clinton called them deplorables. And Joe Biden, maybe he meant it partly, or talked about, garbage. And we've heard other journalists refer them as toothless. And people just won't vote for someone they know doesn't like them and doesn't respect them. It doesn't matter what the policy.
Yeah, but there's plenty of, by the way, just Trump voters that are well-to-do people.
Listen, when you're any of these discussions, there's X number of these and X number of those. I'm saying that part of Trump's base is rock solid. They were never going to vote for anybody else but Trump because they're not going to vote for the people who hate them. And then you have these people who were persuadable because of actual facts on the ground, as Rich is kind of alluding to. And she seemed so unimpressive altogether. What do you say, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, this idea that Democrats look down on, rural people and so forth, there's probably something to that. But Republicans also have their sort of talking points. I mean, the childless cat ladies, the stuff they say about women sometimes. The Obama thing, I mean, it was a private fundraiser. He apologized right after. So, I mean, the guy, he was president for 8 years, and there was one, thing like this. Obama didn't make a habit of doing this. He was very good at actually not doing stuff like that. And the way Trump talks about, his opponents, my God. So I do think there is it's sort of like when you sort of have a feeling of inferiority, you exaggerate. It sounds worse coming from Obama than Trump making fun of college graduates or graduate students or something, because it just seems you don't expect it. Oh my God, Obama. So yeah, there is this sort of class dynamic where liberals are the upper class party, and so they have to be a little bit more careful. It just stings more when they do this stuff.
I actually said exactly what you just said, that they also, I've sensed, they have their own sense of inferiority. If they came to New York as tourists and they walked into some beautiful nightclub with beautiful people there dressed in, fashionable clothes, they would immediately feel super uncomfortable in their own skin, because it's I don't belong here. This isn't. So they start with that kind of.
It's sort of like PC with race, right? When whites say stuff about blacks, it hurts a lot more than when blacks say stuff about whites. And we have norms against it. So it's okay for politicians to say big city liberal, San Francisco liberal. If a politician from San Francisco or New York says, a bunch of rubes in Kansas, that's much more politically incorrect. So we do have this kind of thing where the group that's seen as a little bit lower status or less advantaged in American society does that. So I don't know what liberals can do exactly, just because they are the upper class party. So they're always going to be held to a higher standard on that stuff.
But I think, the comedians always talk about punching up and punching down, and that's kind of a related concept. But I think I'm offended by the lack of respect so many of these elite people, I know them, I went to school with them, have for their fellow citizens. If you spend time, I'm pretty sure you have, with everyday people from walks of life that you haven't experienced, in a very short time, you begin to realize they're awesome, they're funny. You begin to enjoy their differences. They're not dumb, they're just wildly different. And I don't.
Well, Richard says they are dumb.
Sometimes they are dumb. I mean, that's a very that's a.
Well, you were talking about the IQ differences between the
Sometimes they are dumb. I think that there is some truth. Yeah, I mean, what Noam is saying sounds beautiful, and we should all like, try to respect people and all of that. But I mean, there are like IQ differences, and like some people are much fatter than others, and like I don't think it
But
like
isn't
it's
it
a sort of
also
like,
dumb? I mean, aren't you also an idiot if you're chanting from the river to the sea and then somebody asks you what river and what sea and you say the Hudson? Like you're
Yeah.
also an idiot. Like
Who said the Hudson?
so
Yeah.
in one of these like viral videos that they're like, it was like at Columbia or something.
yeah.
I don't
It's
even like the
legitimate.
idea.
Yeah, it's legitimate. Those were dumb. Those were uninformed people. Yeah,
I mean,
I
if
don't
you're,
know.
if you're smart enough, you'll have a differential with the average person that you meet in any walk of life, right?
But like normal like it's easy to just go around looking like I saw some lady went viral on Twitter. Her name was like Susan Smith. That wasn't her name. Something like that. She was some obscure lady. She had PhD in her bio, so she's insecure, and she has things like
I saw this. Susan Ann, or
yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And she said something like, white uneducated, white non-college graduates are going to destroy the country or something like that. And then this got like 14 million views. And I looked at this like, who the hell is this woman, right? And all these people are retweeting, this is why Democrats lose. And I'm like, this is not the DNC. This is not Joe Biden. This is just some random woman. And if you're going to go out of your way to find that stuff, it's always going to be out there. So if I think people need perspective. I think people can hope that Kamala shouldn't talk like that. Tim Walz shouldn't talk like that. Biden, Obama shouldn't talk like that. Anderson Cooper shouldn't talk like that. But if we're just going to find any random woman who has PhD in her bio and say this is going to determine our politics, we're in trouble because there's no curing that.
So here, her name is Suanna Smith, PhD. The tweet that I'm about to read has 17.2 million views.
Yeah, and it's all people dunking on her. It's not liberals saying this is great. It's all people saying that, screw this woman.
Oh, that's good. So the tweet is, there is a reason why educated people vote blue. What we're seeing is the uneducated population of America holding the rest of the country hostage. This is why there's such a push to weaken education, ban books, and outlaw the teaching of Black history by the Republican Party. And then there's a little bit more. I mean,
how many followers does she have? How big of a deal is this woman on?
I'll tell you right now. She has 1,500 followers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And conservatives for 5 years are going to remember that tweet and say, this is why we hate the left.
Yeah. Well, Periel has a little bit of that elitism too, by the way. And she's not particular. No, never mind. All right. Richard, you're such an interesting guy. I'm not going to bring up the issue of you're a guy who has a story of redemption in your own ideology, which is very inspiring in a way. I only bring it up to say that I imagine that you agree that the left was a threat to you because they would try to unearth stuff from your past, and they've tried to ruin you, right? Unsuccessfully because you're your own boss.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I felt sort of the boot of these people. I mean, I know, as much as anybody, I think that you have to go out of your way not to let that color your view too much. I mean, the fact I want everyone to love Richard Hanania and never censor him and, give him, the biggest megaphone possible. And I think I'm, smart and reasonable and all that. But at the same time, that can't be my entire politics and that can't be my entire worldview. And I can't just run into the arms of anyone who's right wing and say, no matter what crazy thing they're saying, this is my side. I could say the new Twitter is better for me. I had even not even the old stuff that I wrote that was actually crazy, years ago. I would get suspended on Twitter. Once I made a joke, death to boomers, something like that, just death to boomers making fun of somebody. I got a 10-day suspension or something on Twitter. And I had 2 strikes for really BS. And they were, targeting me because I'm right leaning, obviously, or at least not caring about me because, these other people get more leeway. And Twitter has been much better for me. I've gotten a lot more followers. I get a lot more engagement. Elon himself follows me and likes my tweets and retweets me sometimes, and that's great. I have that perspective, and at the same time, I could say, "Wow, Twitter sucks in a lot of ways." And it's just you just have to sort of work to keep that perspective.
I got to make this speech in a week or two. If anything comes to mind about along the lines of that subject, email me. I'll give you credit in the speech. I want to, it's a free speech thing, so I do want to say something to annoy them. I think that's very much in line with what they should expect. Somebody tweak them a little bit.
Yeah, and if you have if you have a draft or something you want me to look at, yeah, send it over. I'd be glad to.
Oh, that'd be terrific.
Giving feedback.
All right. Any final hot take on any subject under the sun that you're thinking about these days before we let you go?
No, I mean, it's going to just be, we're just less than, 24 hours from finding out what happened in the election. It's going to be a fascinating 4 years. What I'm going to be looking for is, so my support for Trump is based on the idea that it's going to be not going to be RFK coming and Tulsi Gabbard coming into the administration. It's going to be looking like something like a normie Republican administration that we had last time. As normal as a Trump administration can be. And so I think when, the talk is going to start like tomorrow for who's going to get what position, and the betting markets I saw were already up for Secretary of Defense and all that. And so that's the interesting thing to watch for between now and the inauguration. It'll tell us a lot about what kind of Trump administration we're going to get.
I want to know, I want to know if Noam is pleased on balance with the outcome.
Can I tell you after his administration ends? I mean,
I thought you meant after the podcast.
The risk that we might be taking is not a responsible risk that I would ever take with the United States of America. I feel that much apprehension about Trump that I could never just simply sign off on the idea like, yeah, this is fine to make this guy the most powerful man in the world for 4 years. Having said that, I think it's a low probability. It could be 1%, but I wouldn't get in an airplane that has a 1% probability of crashing. So I would never sign on the dotted line for taking that risk. Now that we're in that universe, I can't deny the emotional pleasure I get in seeing the left. I watched Morning Joe this morning, just like flailing about for 6 to 7 different explanations at the point where Al Sharpton called the Hispanics racist because they wouldn't vote for a black woman of color. I mean, it was awesome to see them eating their young. And I can't, I'm still an emotional being, and I get pleasure from that. So no, I wouldn't have, if you put a gun to my head, I would not have put him as the president. But I think, as Richard says, I'm a conservative, and the potential positive outcome from him is definitely much greater than from her. Question is, what you agree? You kind of agree with me, right, Richard?
I love that we're sort of the opposite. Like, I'm just annoyed by all these right-wing people on Twitter, but like, I sort of want Trump. So it seems like you wanted Kamala to win, but like, you also want the left to suffer. And I sort of wanted Trump to win, but I want the right to suffer. So we're sort of parallel. It's really funny.
I also hate the right. And by the way, did you know, I lost a friend over this, what I'm about to tell you. So JFK, I keep saying that, RFK tweets out about he wants to take fluoride out of the water. I'm like, fluoride out of the water? This is fucking crazy. And then Alex Tabarrok, you know who he is, right? Tyler Cowen's partner, the March Revolution, tweets out this very reputable study of studies, which indicates that, actually we don't have sufficient data on the effects of low levels of fluoride in the water. And as a matter of fact, at slightly higher levels, we know that it's harmful. And we didn't know this in 1960 or whatever it was. So actually, I had to say, well, if this study is reliable, of course not. If I had known this, if you told me we don't have sufficient data to tell whether this low level of fluoride is safe for my kids, of course I would never tell you put it in the water. I'd say put it in the water after you find out. I can send it to you. So I sent this to one of my friends, and they fucking freaked out because it's like I'm taking, and I said, listen, nobody hates RFK more than me. Nobody hates conspiracy theories more than me. Nobody more than me is any of those things. But, it wouldn't be the first time that there was a chemical that we all thought was perfectly safe. And yeah, okay, so the John Birch Society also said it. That's an argument? Like, that's not an argument that this is true or false. And we got into it, and I lost a friend over this.
Who?
I can't tell you who it is.
Well, I lost a friend over something similarly ridiculous.
So anyway, you should take a look at that. You can find it in 2 seconds. It's in Alex Tabarrok's Twitter feed.
Okay, yeah, I trust Alex on these things. I didn't know the fluoride thing was still controversial. So yeah, I'll keep an open mind and not jump to conclusions just because RFK said it. Who I feel the same way about him as you do.
Yeah, and apparently in Europe they don't put it in the water.
Well, have you seen the English? They're
And we have it in toothpaste. So that should be, we don't, and how many of us even drink water from the tap anymore, right? So there's so many reasons you might say not to do it. Anyway, we're data-driven people. All right, listen, I was so excited that you agreed to do our show the day after the election. You're one of, I really admire you. Everybody should get your Substack because you're doing very worthwhile thinking on behalf of the human race. And it's the truth. Yeah, he has original things to say all the time. And you never know. This is the highest compliment. Whatever the issue is, I never know, except maybe on Israel, which way Richard Hanania is going to come out. I have to read him to know where he's going to go. And even on Israel, he'll have nuances. It'll be tough to get him to take the anti-Israel position, I believe.
Do you believe Trump overall is the better choice for Israel, or there again you say?
Richard, no question about it.
I have an article called "How Trump Proved the Experts Wrong on Israel." I go into sort of the Abraham Accords and all that. He definitely.
I mean, there's never been a better example of the Biden administration's incompetence, in my opinion, than the way they tried to negotiate for Hamas to release the hostages while at the same time forcing Israel to withhold its military pressure. I mean, any fourth grader could have told you.
I worry about some aspects of Trump's foreign policy, but Israel, and you look at, Kushner's family. I mean, this is something that Trump's base is, pro-Israel. Trump himself is dispositionally there, people around him. Yeah, I think there's a lot of mysteries about what Trump might do on this question. If you like Israel, I think you're going to be happy the next few years.
And by the way, we always have to be open to the idea, because we should all should weigh very heavily on everybody's heart all the people who've died. And there is an argument to be made that a more Trump-like approach to this whole problem early on might have brought this thing to a close much quicker and saved many, many lives. They're still dying, Yeah. And, I know sometimes pro-Israel people can be guilty of actually not caring about that stuff. But on this show, it's something that we've really tried to grapple with, because it's so hard to process war and the consequence to innocent people. And sometimes there has to be war, right? So this kind of half-assed showing of, negotiating without leverage, negotiating while taking the leverage away that the Biden administration forced on Israel. I think a lot of people may have died because of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there was even a report that Sinwar was basically sending letters to other people in Hamas telling them that, the pressure coming from the Biden administration was a reason not to negotiate, not to make a deal. Yeah, I mean, he said we
have them where we want them. That's what he said. Yeah, we have them where we want them.
The strategy, the Western compassion is the strategy, right? They have a strategy, and it depends on them hiding behind enough civilians that you pressure Israel, and Israel can't do anything. And if you don't play along with that strategy, ironically, it actually helps you, because then what's the point? Then they see they have to get real.
Yeah. All right, sir. As always, a pleasure. I'm going to let you go. Richard Hanania, everybody. Good night.
Good night.